Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to Afterburner. I'm Bill Whittle. This is a picture of me back when I was 13. I'm on the left, and those guys behind me are Herb, Phil, and Doug. You can tell from our incredible fashion sense that we all worked together in the Miami Space Transit Planetarium. These guys were like the older brothers I never have. They practically raised me, especially Phil. Now, not a long time after this picture was taken, Phil got married to Bobby, who is awesome, by the way. And they had two daughters, Christy and Karen. And when Christy was very, very young, I stood with Phil out in his backyard, and he showed me something I've never forgotten. Every now and then, Christy would exclaim something in absolute glee like, "Airplane!" But there was no airplane. And just when he was about to correct her, he'd follow to where she was pointing, and out there, far, far away on the very distant horizon, was a tiny little airplane. How'd she catch it? Likewise, she would say, "Bus!" And sure enough, if you really strained to listen, you could hear a bus very faintly driving off just a few blocks away. I think most kids surprise us this way. They see and hear things that we don't see and hear because they've not yet learned how to filter out all of the clutter. Have you ever had the experience of riding as a passenger down a road you usually travel alone as a driver, and then been amazed at all the things you never saw in all that time because your mind was on your driving or on work or on the ruination of the Great Republic or whatever? You saw them. That is, your eyes sensed them, but you didn't perceive them. Now, we filter out a lot of clutter, but that's just the very beginning. Do yourself a favor and watch Richard Feynman Talks About Light on YouTube. He goes into a great discussion of some of the things that I learned back in my planetarium days, namely that the most brilliant searchlight in the world can cross right in front of my face, and unless it bounces off of dust particles in the air, I absolutely cannot see it. That all of the light and colors that I perceive in this room are just an infinitesimal fraction of the total amount of electromagnetic energy in this room right in front of me right now. And it's not just the heat or ultraviolet light that I can't see, but things like cosmic rays coming down through this room after traveling millions of years from dying stars trillions and trillions of miles away. Or the AM radio talk that's going on right now, right in front of my nose. All of the FM music stations, all of the police and fire and CB radios, all of the invisible radio chirping of cell phones, the pulses from the GPS constellations overhead, powerful radars coming not only from LAX, which is just up the road, but bouncing off the ionosphere from Tokyo and Moscow. All of that is right now, right here in this room, right in front of me. And out of all of this clutter, we perceive only the tiniest, narrowest, razor-thin slit. And that's just sight. You know, when I touch something solid, the atoms in one hand don't actually touch the atoms of the other. It's just the electrical fields, the shells of infinitesimal individual charges that feel solid. Without those charges, the atoms of one hand could very easily pass right through those of the other. What we perceive as the densest granite is almost all open space, but we filter that clutter out too. And we can go further. There's very strong evidence that what we see around us is influenced by the fact that we see it at all. When we look at the clutter on a subatomic level, the clutter, well, not changes exactly, it kind of makes up its mind. When you get into the quantum world, you discover that the physical body that I have here is exchanging billions of subatomic particles with the Earth and other objects through forces of gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces. We're walking fountains of particles, pushing them out and sucking them back up again. We don't see that clutter either. And finally, at least as far as this individual monkey brain can go, there's also compelling evidence that we live in an 11-dimensional world. Now, look up one of the best things I've ever seen. It's on YouTube as well, and it's called Imagining the 10th Dimension. I watch it in the same way a dog watches TV. I get little glimpses of something that resembles understanding every minute or two. Now, according to modern physics, all of me, all of this studio, all of the stars and galaxies are three-dimensional objects buried in 11-dimensional space. That what we perceive as time is simply an array of three-dimensional slices of a four-dimensional object. All of our motions throughout all of our lives are just a four-dimensional worm without beginning or end. We've always been here, and we always will be here. I say all of that just to say this. What we perceive out of all this clutter is so monumentally tiny, so achingly small, so razor thin, that we need to be reminded of it all the time. So when I hear guys like Richard Dawkins, who is a brilliant scientist, state with certainty that God is impossible, I just wonder how he can get there, because this entire thing is not about belief or disbelief in God. It is about the arrogance of many scientists who make claims like those made by Dawkins, or state with absolute imperial certainty that all extraterrestrials must be peaceful, and so on. Carl Sagan, writing in The Demon-Haunted World, described what he called a baloney detection kit. That literally taught me how to think. And then this brilliant, brilliant man would go on to make political statements that violated every single one of that remarkable set of rules. Now, Richard Dawkins may be 100% right, but we live in an 11-dimensional matrix where our act of observation determines the outcome of reality, a world flooded and awash in signals that we know are there but that we cannot perceive. And still some of us have the arrogance to assume that while our monkey brains change what we observe on the subatomic level, nothing could be more powerful than us? Do some people actually believe that the thin sliver of precious knowledge that we have so far pried from the fist of nature is all that there is? Certainly, there is out there right now as much clutter as undetectable to us today as the radio and TV waves are to the ants that walk under the transmitters. And this tells me something. It tells me that we are capable of miraculous insight, invention, and imagination. But when science intrudes into politics, as happens more and more these days, we should, I think, like the Roman conquerors, keep a slave behind us, holding the laurels of science over our head and reminding us that pride goeth before the fall. Because we all see through a glass darkly when we see it all.